You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with Henry Hill, Deputy Editor of Conservative Home, and Guardian columnist Zoe Williams. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Well, the Palace update on the King's cancer treatment and his plans to return to public duties is on the front of the Daily Mail. Fit for a king is the Daily Mirror's headline for the same story. The Sun declares the King is back in the saddle, also using that photo of the King and Queen Camilla taken the day after the pair's 19th wedding anniversary earlier this month. The Express notes his first public appearance will be visiting a cancer clinic next week. The return of the King is the Telegraph's headline. And the Times notes his doctors are encouraged by his response to the cancer treatment. The Eye reports emissions of ammonia are rising from poultry farms run by firms that supply chicken, turkey and eggs to major supermarkets and fast food chains. The Guardian has a story on the teacher shortage, a survey finding almost 40% of teaching assistants are covering classes for regular teachers roughly a day a week. Mining conglomerate Anglo American is set to be bought or broken up, according to the Financial Times. And the Star carries a story about the curse of the pharaohs reportedly being solved. Very interesting. A reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by Zoe Williams and Henry Hill. Welcome to both of you. Let's start with the Daily Mail and this beautiful picture of the King and Queen Camilla and the story that, well, their headline, The Smiles, saying that the King is going back to work. We will be returning to public duties. Henry.
I mean, yeah, it's one of those stories. Yeah, good. we're delighted to hear it. It's one of those stories when it's on so many front pages because it's obviously a great thing. It's been hugely concerning. The King's health as well as Kate's health, being in danger at the same time, and I think his absence has been felt. The royal family do an awful lot of work supporting a huge number of charitable causes, and the absence of so many senior royals from the front lines will obviously won't have affected the day-to-day running of the country very much, but there will be an awful lot of engagements that they had to miss or push back, and those people will have felt it. So I'm delighted to see him back on his feet. Obviously, his cancer, he hasn't got the all clear yet. No. He's still being treated, but it's clearly at least manageable, and that's excellent news, and I wish him the best.
Yes, and Zoe, his doctors clearing him to resume public duties, obviously, but as Henry says, he will still be undergoing treatment.
I mean, it's very interesting, isn't it? Because the Daily Mail did get right to the core of what was good about that picture, which is how happy Camilla looks, whereas both the Sun and the Mirror go with this really, really tortured wordplay. Look at that, fit for a king. Like, in order to make that work, describing that photo, you have to read it fit for a king, which doesn't make any sense at all. And then the Sun goes with back in the saddle, which again doesn't make any sense at all. I think it's interesting, the release of information by the Palace, because they were very careful to always be honest, but they were very careful not to be completely open. You know, they never said what kind of cancer it was. They never said whereabouts in his treatment he was. And I think actually that led people to kind of slightly catastrophizing scenarios, which makes me think actually it was a smarter play than it looked at the time to be plain but not expansive, because it's given everybody this lift. Everybody's like, oh, I thought it was worse than that. It's obviously better than we thought. That's, I think, why all the papers united in being really thrilled about it.
OK, let us move on to, well, the Telegraph is the same picture there. It's on very many front pages, the return of the King. I wonder, Henry, whether you think that it was the right move by the Palace not to give further detail as to what type of cancer the King is suffering from.
I do. I mean, first of all, I think that even the royal family are entitled to some level of privacy as human beings like anyone else. And there's a really irritating stream of coverage, not coverage, but of criticism of the royal family, which is basically, well, you haven't given me information, and so now I'm speculating, and that's bad. If you want to stop me speculating, then you should tell me everything that I want to know. But I think I also agree with Zoe. It does appear to have been very adept press management. Of course, we don't know. It might have been that it really was serious, and he's simply been very lucky or very well treated. We don't know. But yeah, I don't think the palace obviously should be honest, should never lie to the country about the health of the royal family, but it's not under obligation to give every gory detail for the same reason that if you or I were being treated, we would have the right to control how much information we gave to the public.
And Zoe noted that the King and Queen Camilla, their first engagement will be a visit to a cancer centre on Tuesday.
Yeah, I mean, I think he was very moved by the kind of national response to it. Do you remember 3 or 4 weeks ago when everybody had written to him and he had all those get well soon cards, and he was really, it absolutely had a tsunami of them. There were so many, and they were often very heartfelt. And quite kind of, you know, a lot of kind of gentle humour. And I think, I don't know, I mean, I think he's genuinely, obviously, as king, one assumes that one's subjects care for one, but you wouldn't necessarily know it until they say it. Yeah. So I think it may have kind of, I don't know, maybe made him feel a little bit more kind of connected.
Yeah. I mean, it's said that he was very touched by the volume of mail and communications that he received from well-wishers.
Yeah, and I think it's also a reminder of, obviously people can have different views on whether or not we have a monarchy, but I think one of the virtues of it is that kind of mass point of connection with somebody who isn't political. You know, maybe in his younger days he strayed a bit close to the edge at times as Prince of Wales, but no, but you've got this family at the head of the nation, and so they have their trials and they have their triumphs, and you have weddings and funerals, and it's a very kind of organic process and rhythm to the top of national life. And it does mean that you can have this relationship with the king where you feel for him and you want to write to him, that with the best will in the world, no one has with a politician, right? Like, even the best politicians don't get that kind of response. So I think it's been a reminder of, I think, one of the virtues of having a constitutional monarchy is the reaction that the king got from the public. I
don't know. I mean, I don't want to hex him, but I bet you if one of the old school politicians, like if John Major or Gordon Brown was ill, I bet you they would get a huge amount of... Like, I mean, I wouldn't put it past myself to write a get well soon card to John Major, and I'm not on your team. It's just...
That's an amazing admission.
You know, these people who've been a constant figure in public life and strike such a contrast with today's chancellors, I think they probably do command more devotion than you realise.
I think maybe slight FBPE, slightly FBPE that. But
Should we have a look at another story? Hamza Yousaf, I will not stand down as SNP leader, the Telegraph. This is despite facing no confidence motion next week, in fact, next week.
I mean, it's remarkable the extent to which the Scottish Government's been kind of ailing for some time, but things have taken an absolute nosedive. Basically, the Scottish Greens, outraged by the Scottish Government decision to row back on some of their wilder environmental commitments and on some of their trans policies, had agreed to put the Bute House Agreement, which is the coalition agreement between the Scottish Greens and the SNP, to a vote of their members. Hamza Yousaf, trying to get ahead of that because he probably saw which way the wind was blowing, tore it up himself, scrapped the deal. But now that means that the SNP does not have a majority in the Scottish Parliament, and the Greens have said they'll vote against Yousaf in a no-confidence vote. Now, previously, if they had the Greens on side, they had a majority. If the Greens were willing to abstain, they've got a plurality, they'd still win. They outnumber the unionist parties. But if the Greens are voting against the Scottish Government, that means that he could actually lose. It all comes down to one MSP, Ash Regan, who quit the SNP to join Alex Salmond's party, and of whom...
She's no friend.
No, well, when she left, he said it's no great loss. And his future is now in her hands. So it's absolutely fascinating. If he does lose, Scottish Parliament will have 28 days to select a new First Minister, or there will be a Scottish election on top of all the other news.
Zoe, do you think he's hugely miscalculated?
I don't know that it's a kind of miscalculation so much as an absolute, what's it called when everything goes wrong at once?
Don't think we can say it on air.
A storm?
A storm, a perfect storm. No, I mean, I don't think... you know, did he miscalculate by rowing back from the green policies? But it was obvious that it was going to capsize the agreement. I'm not sure it was obvious that he would get quite such immediate and kind of really vivid opposition from the Greens. The minute they left that partnership, they would be immediately on his case. And it's
ejected from the partnership. They didn't leave of their own volition.
No, they were ejected from the partnership, but they were, you know, he made it impossible. Even if they hadn't been ejected, he would have made it impossible by just rowing back on the promises, because it's pointless being a Green Party if you're going to stand. It's not like being a Lib Dem and allowing tuition fees. It's like being a Green Party and not maintaining.
In his defence, the policies were undeliverable.
Well,
they'd set 2030 targets with no roadmap for hitting them, and then there was a plan to shut, I think, 10% of Scotland's waters to all human activity, including swimming.
The thing is, Henry, as charming as you are, your version of realistic and the Greens' version of realistic are based on fundamentally different parameters of what's important. You know, everything's realistic if you make it a priority.
But they didn't do any actual policy for it.
We're going to have
to
leave it there with that Zoe calling you charming.
There we go.
You didn't take that compliment.
No,
did you?
No, of course I did.
You did. OK, thank you both for the moment. Coming up, this story on the front of The Guardian about a teacher shortage in schools. More on that and other stories coming up. Do stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching the press preview. Still with me, Zoe Williams and Henry Hill. Let's take a look at The Guardian and this story about teacher shortages and the fact that nearly 40% of teaching assistants are covering classes because there aren't enough teachers. Zoe, take us into this first.
I mean, it's so outrageous because teaching assistants are very ill paid, right? They're on £14,000 a year, and which is really low, even compared to the average wage. They're not. It's absolutely crucifying, that life, especially when teachers go on strike, actually, because teaching assistants aren't paid for the strike, but they can't work, so they don't get paid at all. And the idea that they're also teaching classes while not getting paid any extra and not getting any kind of career development or training is really unfair on them, really unfair on kids, and really unfair on the teachers who really aren't, you know, but they're basically running on skeletal staff because teachers are burnt out and they're having a recruitment crisis, and it's being patched over by the use of TAs. But really, from a parent/kids point of view, what I would quibble with is that this constitutes teaching. It's like if you talk to your kids and they've had a TA teach them instead of a teacher, they're really just handing out a worksheet and or sticking them in front of a video. There's a reason why teachers are qualified, and that's because teaching is really hard, and you actually can't do it when you're not qualified. So I'm kind of slightly suspicious of the framing of this. I don't think it should be called teaching by unqualified teachers. I think it should be called minding while you wait for a teacher. And I think then parents might get a sense of the crisis which is besetting so many schools.
But another aspect of this, Henry, is that the teaching assistants, many of them, they are there to help the 1.5 million children with special needs. So they're left to struggle because they don't have that extra help.
Yeah, exactly. It's a problem that's really playing out in other parts of the public sector as well, like the NHS, where you've got a looming battle over physician associates, which is where basically, over the past few years, we've tried to find ways of bringing people in to do sort of some of the labour for as little money as possible, like teaching assistants. And then as the crisis has got worse and worse, they end up being asked to do more stuff than they are qualified for. Now, I quibble with Zoe slightly. Some of them might be capable of leading a lesson, I don't know, because you can, in the private school sector, teach without being a qualified teacher in the traditional sense, but they are not meant to be teaching, for sure. And they're not paid for it, they're not remunerated properly for it, and yet, obviously, they step up when they have to, because otherwise there's no one to take that class. And this is a problem that is not just confined to schools, it's not going away, and I think it's going to be a real challenge for the incoming government, whichever party it is. What are you going to do about this? Like, where do you find the money? All the government budgets are already stretched. how do you find the money to solve this problem?
OK, Henry and Zoe, we must leave it there. Much more in the next hour. Thank you very much for the moment.